Welcome to our Fabric webinar. I am Evan Gordon, a principal consultant here at Kaizan, and I will be taking us through our little journey of some use cases within Fabric and some of the cool things that are available to us within the platform. So a quick little introduction as to who Kaizan is and why you should care about listening to us on Fabric. We are a gold partner with Microsoft who've been doing this for over 30 years. We have over 11 Microsoft specializations and are very passionate about helping everybody get the most out of their technology, specifically around the Microsoft stack. So one of the things that we are really focusing on here lately has been Fabric and making sure that everybody has the ability to get the most out of their data in this new AI landscape. So Fabric, our offer analytics in the era of AI, is how we help people get familiar with the functionality of Fabric and design some stuff that they can have in their own environment and start getting ready for the oncoming onslaught of all of these new data and all of the new analyses that need to be done to them. So with that little intro out of the way, let's talk about what Fabric is, where it fits into the space, and then we'll get into the best part of any webinar, the demo. So let's start with a little bit of history. Currently, the Microsoft Analytics portfolio is quite vast. There's a lot of different pieces that can be integrated in many different ways and can be piecemealed. So we don't have to use every single piece here. And in fact, if you were to, you'd end up with a sprawling mess of a solution that would be almost impossible to administrate. So you pick and choose. Maybe you're using Data Factory and Synapse with Power BI to visualize the data. Maybe you're using Spark and Databricks with Data Explorer and AI to analyze that data. However that might be going on in your current organization, there's lots of different pieces moving around, and there's a lot of different ways to integrate those together. There's multiple bills that need to be accounted for. There's movement between these systems. It's overall fractured, but fairly complete. What Fabric offers, and the whole reason that we're here today, is that it is not just another thing to integrate and another place to have your data go into, but it is really intended to be this complete analytics platform. So this is not to completely remove the need for any of these other individual systems, but more to offer a single place to have all of these functions and to allow other people that might be outside of central IT to be able to create more robust solutions that have a lower chance of breaking and most importantly, aren't just based out of access. So Fabric is really about being this complete analytics platform that allows us to build these end-to-end solutions. And the way that this comes about is by opening up this data and allowing it to be accessed by multiple different types of people. So whether this be central IT, whether this be business users, HR, finance, whoever. This lake-centric design pattern, everything being on the one lake, which is our kind of standard storage layer that underpins the whole of Fabric, is the foundation all this is built on. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to not just empower our IT people that are already familiar with our solutions, but get those same enterprise grade tools into the hands of business users in a UI and experience that is much simpler and much easier to grasp than the code first endpoints that we might be familiar with as central IT type people. And all of this is in alignment with the boom of AI. So Copilot is embedded within almost every workload of Fabric at this point, and I say almost because it is currently being expanded. So it started off with just a couple of pieces, and by now it's already in over 80% of the workloads within Fabric. And many things are planned in the near future to expand that and get even closer to 100% coverage of Copilot. So anything from ingesting data, bringing stuff in from whatever source system you might have, all the way to making and explaining reports in Power BI are all available as part of AI embedding with Copilot. Now, that's a lot of abstract words. To make this a little bit more specific, we had our slide that showed all those different pieces of the data landscape. And now, all within Fabric, we have these pieces, but instead of them being separate and we have to integrate all of them, whether that be having to set up networks or set up different subscriptions in Azure, we now have Fabric, and that is where this lives. So we have Data Factory, we have data engineering and data science, we have storage, we have reporting, and many more. All of this being on the one lake, which means we don't have to move the data around. We have a single copy of it. And this is really beneficial, not just because it simplifies our solutions. We don't have to worry about moving data around nearly as much, but it also helps us gain consistency, because now rather than having to have all of these separate places that everybody has to agree on what the truth is, we can have a single record, a single system, and a single source of truth that allows us to have everybody in agreement on what the revenue for last quarter was, or how many employees we currently have. Those kind of basic questions that can be rather hard to track down and agree on as an organization become much easier to align when we have this underpinning of the single one lake. Now, I've talked a lot. I've had a lot of slides. So we're going to get out of the boring part of the presentation and get into the fun bit. So I mentioned that we're going to be doing some stuff. So I have a workspace here, and you can see I have a diamond, which means that we are in Fabric. Now I've gone ahead and baked some stuff ahead of time, but we will take that out of the oven in a minute. What I want to show first up is that we can source data from many different places. So we will go ahead and start by ingesting some data from a SharePoint site. So I have this Excel file, BI dimensions, and this has a bunch of data in it that I need to know about. So I'll go ahead and pop this open and show us what we have. So we have geo, which is all of our geography information, so our cities that map onto our regions and districts. We have manufacturers, which is all of the different manufacturers that we're going to be analyzing, as well as some logos. So these are links to images. And we also have details on the product. Now you'll see that this data is a little bit messy, especially if you're familiar with some of this engineering stuff. We have a lot of blanks. We have some headers. Nothing that's completely out of the realm of ordinary, but we have some extra stuff in here that will make it harder to analyze. So we'll have to clean this up. So first of all, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to copy the direct link to that file. And then we're going to come in here and we're going to get a new Dataflow Gen 2. And the reason that we're selecting Dataflow Gen 2 is that it is a very simple UI. So we're going to be doing all of this just through drag and drop, through clicking, not having to write any code. And also because a Gen 2 allows us to output this data into a target database. So in this case, it'll be a lakehouse, and we'll talk about what that means in a little bit. So we can see that we have our data that got pulled in. Here's our Excel workbook. I'm going to select our relevant data and go ahead and pull this in. And this will take just a second to show up. Here we have all of our data that we were just looking at. And like I said, this is a little bit messy. So I'm going to go through rather quickly and transform some of this data. Today is not really about how to transform these data or the specifics of why it's cool to be able to do this type of stuff. Realistically, we're just going to go through, show that we can clean up this data, get it into a format that we're ready to report on, and then use that as our demo. So don't worry too much about the specifics of what's going on here. Really, we're just worried about the conceptual nature of I am cleaning up some data. So we have some really messy data that we're going to start off with, and I'm going to remove some of these rows that we don't need so that we have just our base data. Then we're going to do some transposing so that we get our data into the right shape. And we've gone from some really messy data into this nice table that we can start working with. And I'm going to rename this to manufacturer with a capital M so that it's all nice and easy to use. And then we're going to do a very similar thing. We see that we have some extra rows up here. I'm going to remove the top 3 rows and promote the headers. All right. And we'll rename this geography. And then finally product. So like I said, this is maybe missing some data. We don't really have to transform this too much in terms of getting stuff out of here. We really care about getting more things in here. So we're going to fill down to get some more data in here. And we're going to split this column so that we can get the separate name and type. All right. And that is essentially our data transformation here. I'm going to rename this to product. Now, like I said, we have the ability as part of Dataflow Gen 2 to do data destination. So what this lets us achieve is that we can take this transformed data that we have and land it somewhere else. So we don't just have it transformed and then we're just kind of holding it and say, we have this now. Instead, we get to go and put it somewhere where we're able to use this down the road. So I'm going to put this in our webinars, sales analytics lakehouse. Now, like I said, I've already baked this ahead of time just in case anything were to go wrong with this. So we're going to back out of this. And we can see that we have source dimensions. So this is what we were essentially just creating. We have all of these. They have data destinations set up. And what that means is that when this runs, it pulls data into this sales analysis lakehouse. So we can go ahead and get in here and start looking at these data. So exactly like we were seeing before, we have a geography, we have manufacture. It's going to take just a second to pull up here. And this is why we pre-bake some things. So this allows us to store all that data and use it other places. Now you might notice that we have all 3 of our tables that we pulled in earlier as part of that data flow, but we also have this sales table. Now, like I mentioned previously, we have the one lake that everything lives on top of, and that we can use this to have a single source of truth, a single point of integration. So with sales, instead of pulling this in and writing our own logic, our own data flow or notebook, what have you, we were able to mirror or to shortcut, in this case, to this data. And what that means is that instead of having to have a copy of it locally within this lakehouse, we were able to reference it somewhere else. So what this looks like, I can go to Get Data and then select New Shortcut. I will select one lake. And then you'll see there's quite a few options in here. We do not need to worry about all of these. What we're looking for is this demo lakehouse. And we see we have our sales table. So we're going to select it. Now this is showing us all of the files underneath the hood of what's going on. We don't care too much about all that. Realistically, we just care about tables, sales. And we can see, because there are files here, this is where this stuff actually lives. This lives within that demo lakehouse in this other workspace. I can go ahead and hit next. And instead of hitting create, because we already have it, that creates this sales table. So now we have a representation of that data here within our lakehouse without having to go through the process of sourcing it, of transforming it. And we know that our data will always match the data that is being used in that other place. So rather than having to copy it and do all that work more than once, we can do it exactly once, use it throughout the organization, and then we don't have to do that same stuff again. We get a single copy of it, meaning we are always in alignment on what is true. So lots of benefits there in terms of speeding things up and reducing confusion down the line. So I did speed through this sourcing process because there are many, many, many ways of sourcing data, and this is but a couple of them. I think these are the most common ones that I have seen so far and are very powerful when paired together, being able to use the same data other places and being able to source data from wherever it might be. Our example here today was SharePoint. It can be files sitting somewhere else. It can be databases. It can be APIs. Whatever your data might be, we can reach it from Fabric. But we just have some data here, right? These are just numbers sitting in a table. This is not super useful. So this is where the single platform really comes in handy. We have systems other places that can do each individual task we've done so far, but being able to now get our semantic model where we're able to relate our data together. So I'll go ahead and open this up. So we're able to relate our data together. We see that we have our manufacturer, which is related to product, and then that product goes into sales, so on and so forth. We have our measures. So we have our calculations that lets us see, let's say previous years. So we're going to be able to calculate our previous year's sales. So we're able to enrich this data and make it easier for us to make some pretty pictures down the line. And all of this can be done directly, from this website. I have not left app.fabric.microsoft.com so far. So we've gone and sourced our data. We've set up a data store. We've set up our database essentially with our lakehouse. We're seeing our analytics here. I can come in and edit that. I can add additional measures. And I can even click our friendly new report button. And start making our reports here. We can start putting together some pretty pictures. So I'll go ahead and get a bar graph out here. And we will get some sales figures. So we'll get our sales numbers and our previous year. And then we will grab our date. And we have essentially now, without leaving the platform, without having to write any code whatsoever, gone from an Excel file sitting out in a SharePoint site and somebody else's data sitting in a database into this graph without having to do anything too crazy, right? All of this was dealt with one license, didn't have to go between multiple platforms, and all of this is within the same place. We can reuse this as many times as we want now. And in fact, on theme of pre-baking things, we do have some pretty pictures just to show what kind of the extent of some of our BI reports can be. So this is based on the same data that we were just looking at, displayed slightly differently. And as always with Power BI, we can click on things and we can get specifics, right? So we can see now we're looking at, just convenience. And this is showing us that our market share as part of convenience is a little over 60%. And we can look at that for, let's say, Australia. So I can right click on Australia. I can go to the by manufacturer page here. Fairly common drill through functionality. And I can start clicking on individual products all the way down here. I can click on categories and then use that to cross filter and look at a specific year for that category. So lots of ins and outs, lots of ability for us to see the data and to get true analysis out of it once we have this setup completed. So that's what I am really excited about with Fabric, is our ability to have one place that is easy to use, to integrate all of our data together, to pull it in from our different locations, wherever they might be, and then make sure that everybody has the ability to see that data in the way that they prefer and in a way that allows them to be more effective when they're making decisions about what to do or how to do it. So I think that this is really a phase change in the way that we go about solving these types of analytics problems. So instead of having to have all these different pieces moving around and spending a lot of time agonizing over which piece do we use, how do we connect it up, we can move a lot more quickly and a lot more effectively by using Fabric and letting us have a single place to do all of this.